We are proud to welcome Ganapathy Murugesh to the Global Tamil Startup Investors Summit.
Of Opportunities panel discussion. The opening remarks on context setting, Ms. Veena Srinivasan, Director, Center for Social and Environmental Innovation, and the panelists, Mr. S.A. Sundaresan, Head EV and E-Mobility Solutions, Ashok Leyland, and Mr. George Jacob, President and CEO, Bay Equatorium. I welcome you all to the dais.
Dr. Veena Srinivasan, a water expert with 20 years experience working with water management in India. She is a senior fellow at Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and the Environment, ATREE, where she leads the Center for Social and Environmental Innovation, CSEI. As a water researcher, Veena's work has always been interdisciplinary. Her focus has been on solutions that are backed by science, but designed for people facing the Indian water crisis. At CSEI, she is leading the mission to transform scientific research into real-world impact by designing solutions that simultaneously create livelihoods and conserve the environment. Veena received her PhD from Stanford University and is an alumnus of Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. We are proud to welcome Dr. Veena Srinivasan to the Global Tamil Startup Investors Summit. George Jacob, the President and CEO of Bay Equatorium, the largest non-profit conservation group in San Francisco, that oversees institutions with a unified mission to protect and conserve the bay and its fragile ecosystems from the Sierra to the sea. He currently leads a landmark transformation of the aquarium into an iconic $260 million immersive ecotarium, the first of its kind climate resilience and ocean conservation living museum in the world, with an estimated $2 billion economic impact on the California tourism industry. In 2008, Jacob was honored to be the project director for the production of the 1812 Star-Spangled Banner, permanent exhibit that inspired the American national anthem, rededicated to the nation by then President George W. Bush. Jacob has authored 12 books and 150 plus opinion editorials on tourism, destination development, museum design, civic reach, sustainability, public art, heritage and advocacy for newspapers and publications and TV networks. He has won the 2019 Louis Kamokat Medal for Lifetime Achievement in Preserving and Promoting Geography, Heritage and Culture by the Royal Canadian Geographic Society. We are proud to welcome George Jacob to the Global Tamil Startup Investors Summit. S.A. Sundaresan. S.A. Sundaresan is currently the head of new technologies at Ashok Leyland. He is responsible for identifying technologies of relevance and evolving the strategy for their absorption and implementation. A mechanical engineer by education, he completed his UG at IIT Madras and PG at Stanford University. His past experiences range from developing hermetic compressors, sheet metal engineering, plant and business digitalization, systems engineering, controls engineering, digital twin, embedded software development tools, and design of commercial electric vehicles. We are proud to welcome S.A. Sundaresan to the Global Tamil Startup Investors Summit.
Hello, Vanakkam, and thank you very much for staying this afternoon for this panel discussion on sustainability. Throughout the day, we've heard from a number of panelists on a number of different topics, from women's entrepreneurship to technology. And I think that towards the end, this late afternoon panel on sustainability addresses one of the biggest crises that humanity faces, which is that of global climate change and the larger problem of biodiversity loss. A lot of us, we speak about the economy, we speak about investment without realizing that a lot of our economy is dependent on basic ecosystem services and natural capital being preserved. So it's a very important set of discussions because we're really talking about is life on planet Earth even going to exist in 200 years? And in 200 years, if we've destroyed everything, then there is no life, there is no economy. So I would say that, one of the most important investments that we can make is investment in our planet. As people often say, we have no planet B. This is the only planet that we have. So we have two very distinguished panelists today who come from very, very different backgrounds. Mr. Sundaresan, who's coming from electric mobility, and Mr. George Jacob, who's really coming from the climate museum aspect. So it's a very, very diverse set of perspectives, and therefore really exciting for us to bring them together. So I wanted to start asking each of them to talk about their contributions to the larger global climate crisis. From their own perspectives. Both have been innovators in two different spaces. And so I thought we'll start with Mr. George Jacob and then to Mr. Sundaresan.
Sure. As you mentioned, we come from completely different backgrounds. In the last 42 years, the Bay Institute, which is a policy think tank in California, has tried to address climate change from different perspectives. We have some front-facing branches. So we have 7 branches in San Francisco, and this is the transformation of the existing aquarium into a climate and ocean conservation living museum. And one of the things that we felt was central in this dialogue on climate change was awareness. We attend a number of conferences where the message is pretty much given to those who are already evangelized in some fashion or the other. But an average person on the street is not really aware of the challenge of climate change. They don't know what it is. They don't know what the impact of it is. They don't know what SDG goals are. So we felt that a living museum where oceans act as a lens can become that engine of awareness that leads to informed, engaged climate action.
Thank you so much. Some really beautiful pictures from the many, many museums that you've set up there. Mr. Sundaresan, over to you about Ashok Leyland's entry into climate crisis.
Climate change, recently I read one article. We all think climate change is kind of gradual. We see all the kind of plots where you see temperature gradually going up. But what we forget is that is some kind of a global average. And at each location, already the variation in temperature is so huge that that slope actually is pretty exponential and people don't realize. And we saw what happened in US just a couple of weeks ago, and that kind of event is becoming more and more common. But unfortunately, the attention that is the world is spending towards combating this climate change is not enough. I mean, you see a lot of startups, but how many are working in actually technologies that are going to do anything about mitigating that temperature change? So given that from Ashok Leyland, we do recognize that mobility matters in multiple ways. See, without mobility, economy is not there. We all learned that during the COVID lockdown. You impose a lockdown, you kind of say vehicles off the road, then you kill almost everything else. So given that the imperative to come up with a kind of mobility solutions that do not that do not cause further damage to the environment, that becomes the key. But science, you see any technology, there's no free lunch. You talk about electric vehicles, there are a lot more challenges. How do you generate the electricity? Sure, renewable energy, but for producing that renewable energy, the kind of investment you need, and again, if you talk about solar panels, how much land do you need? Or if you put it even on oceans, are you causing some other damage? How do you know? And it takes a while for us to assess all that. So what we are doing at Ashok Leyland is kind of investing in multiple technologies, not just electric vehicles. We are also looking at hydrogen, but again, hydrogen comes with its own challenges. Then, apart from that, there are a lot of transitionary technologies like CNG and LNG is a big transition technology, given that you don't really need much of technology, you don't need to develop much of it, it is only the fuel that matters. So like that, we are working on multiple technologies and we are looking to work with startups where we need some totally out of the box ideas. An organization like Ashok Leyland, which is just entering its 75th year, we carry a lot of legacy. So given that it becomes a little difficult for us to really think of, this morning people were talking about complex problems, simple solutions. Often, if you ask an engineer who has spent 30 years working on mobility, simple solution never comes to mind. You only think of something very complex. So there, we think there is opportunity for startups to come up with some solution that is staring at our face, but which may be much better than any of the technologies that are on board now. And so we have already working with a few startups and we would like to work with many more. And actually we have a program that kind of helps us provide all information that is necessary, support, and hope to achieve success together.
Fantastic. I think maybe I could ask a follow-up question actually to you first, Mr. Sundaresan, which is, if you had to think about, in terms of the last 15, 20 years, what has been the most disruptive innovation that has happened, and also what needs to be done? Because you said that you're calling out to a lot of young startups to come and reach out to you. In what areas do you think they might be working in?
Sure. So last 15 years, the biggest innovation obviously is Tesla. Electrification. Till that point, if you see most of the established automakers were only looking at all the problems. As I said, if you're an established company, you know only the problems, you don't know the solutions. So we all said, okay, batteries may be good, but there is no way they are going to be enough. So hybrid is the only solution. So that's what Toyota did, and a lot of others followed. Pure electric vehicles, they have been coming. Both General Motors, Ford introduced, but they were so bad that nobody was interested in driving them. But Tesla again started from scratch, thought everything new. They, in the process, came up with so many new technologies, and that's clearly showed all of us who have been there in the auto industry, that you need to throw out whatever you know and look at each problem from fundamentals. So that's the biggest revolution. So we are now applying those principles not just for electric vehicles, but to completely reimagine what a truck should be like or what a bus should be like. So that's the biggest change. And in terms of challenges, so electric vehicles, so Tesla is there, but is that a solution for India? Forgetting about electricity generation, that part, I won't get into that, but just from the vehicle part, if you look at the batteries, we have all seen the safety issues that have become prominent. There are solutions, but the problem with all those solutions is that it pushes up the cost. So can we come up with batteries that are safe, that are not that expensive? So that's the biggest challenge. So again, a lot of work is going on. Unfortunately, not so much in India, but abroad, coming up with newer chemistries that are safer at the same time, not so expensive as the dominant lithium-ion batteries. Then in manufacture of those batteries as well. So there's actually a statistic, depending on how the electricity is produced, you need to drive a Tesla for something like 200,000 kilometers, that is at the lower end of calculation, before it becomes as carbon intensive as a fossil fuel vehicle. So that's the statistic. So till that point, the amount of carbon dioxide that is generated to produce that vehicle, it actually, you are producing a lot of carbon dioxide upfront. So in the manufacturing, can you reduce that carbon intensity? Again, we don't manufacture much of electrical aggregates in India. So, but before we start committing to investments that again replicate whatever are the manufacturing practices abroad, can we again reimagine those so that we reduce the energy content or carbon intensity of those basic manufacturing processes for electric vehicles? Next, as I already mentioned, in hydrogen technologies, there are a lot of challenges. And there is actually a very good opportunity for India to become a leader, given that world over hydrogen is, the technologies are still not as mature as even electrical technologies. And then comes the power electronics part, because all of these are, require a lot of power electronics. So given that, and in power electronics, we don't manufacture any, even in design, our competencies are quite low. So again, startups have excellent opportunity to capitalize on this lack of competency and come up with solutions that matter to India.
Wonderful. I think at least in the Indian context where we have so many people still on two-wheelers, you've really offered a whole range of investment and startup opportunities. I think, when I was thinking about how do you connect these two, I think one of the common elements is this idea of design. And one of the things, I hope people looked at those really amazing, inspiring pictures that you sent to us, Mr. Jacob. One of the things that I asked you even before the panel, will India ever have this kind of a museum? I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about your philosophy of the design end, why the need for climate museums and ecotariums in order to inspire people, and then what would it take to bring that level of design and imagination to the Indian context?
Sure. So the buildings that you saw, especially in San Francisco, is a LEED Platinum building. So it's a highly energy efficient building. It's a pillarless prefab that can be constructed in a very short order. And at the core of the bigger dome that you saw is an aquarium with 30,000 animals. So we currently hold about 24,000 animals in 1 million gallons of salt water. That'll go up to 2 million gallons of salt water and 30,000 animals. So the animals actually the ocean serves as a lens for understanding the impact of climate change, especially on the oceans. We only have two lungs. One is the oceans. The second is our forests. And carbon sequestration is central to the mission of understanding the climate crisis. The United States last year produced 5,000 million metric tons of carbon. The building addresses a number of challenges that can be mitigated with an aware audience. So we get about 15 million visitors a year on Embarcadero. We get about 1 million visitors that come to our place every year. We would like to have a 10x impact on the biggest product that we have, which is education and awareness. With a 10x impact on a $260 million project, we're looking at a $2.2 billion allied industry boost, whether it's employment, whether it's education, whether it's robotics, whether it's carbon sequestration, whether it's ocean conservation, whether it's air pollution. There's a number of topics that can be connected with the single mission that we have for this living climate museum in San Francisco and some of the branches that we're planning in Jamaica and Norway. India, of course, is a significant player in climate mitigation. And again, it's a very large country where there's a very large need for a very informed electorate, a very informed civil society that can guide our elected leaders to make sure that India plays its part in reducing its carbon emissions and carbon footprint.
But I think one thing that is really striking from those pictures is they're not brick and mortar museums. India has museums. They just don't necessarily have something that looks like that. Why is it important? Why is design so important, I think, in heightening that awareness?
Sure. There is the pretty picture of a building exterior. But our planning actually begins from a purpose-built design philosophy. So we actually have designed this building to fit a purpose of the functions that the building renders. The shell, which is biomimetic, draws its inspiration from the ocean geometry. And it is powered, a third of its power comes from a microgrid that uses fish waste, and a third of its power comes from a California species of microalgae that generates power to function its labs and deep ocean exploration units. And of course, the iconic presence of the building attracts people to the location as a destination.
And I mean, just to clarify, yours is a non-profit venture, but it's philanthropically funded primarily, correct?
Yes, it's a nonprofit that has been around for about 42 years. And the funding for capital expansion comes from a multitude of sources that includes philanthropy, state, federal, and other sources, including financial institutions.
Wonderful. I mean, I think that it's really nice to kind of see the two very different directions in which the two panelists have kind of both made separate contributions to the climate crisis. But I thought one useful way to kind of ask both of you is, since we've got, you know, very senior members of the Tamil Nadu government here, representatives from various national organizations, if you had to ask, what is the policy support required let's start with you, the policy support required for your vision, and you mentioned a whole bunch of different areas in which disruption needs to happen. What would be the elements of policy support from the government for you?
I think both central and state governments actually have been very, very bold and proactive in coming up with a lot of policies that encourage this. Where we probably need more focus is creating an ecosystem. As I said, as of now, most of the work in India that's happening is more in integrating various aggregates we are still importing and assembling an electric vehicle or thing. Ather is probably one of the few electric vehicle manufacturers who have invested in development, and now Ola is doing that. But research in fundamental, I mean, lab level research is happening at many institutions, but translating that from the lab to actual manufacture, industrialization of that basic, let's say, battery cell manufacture, that is not there. For that, you need a lot of ecosystem. Now, if we look at a country like Israel, we can just go there with a chemistry. There are labs there which kind of do it for a fee. They synthesize, they produce the cell, give it to you, and then you can take it to another lab for testing. You get the results and so on. That kind of an ecosystem is missing. So we need focus on either policies or some kind of setting up a maybe national level lab which can allow that. But again, just in the recent past, we heard that those things are happening. So at least for cell chemistry research, there are labs coming up. Similarly, for hydrogen technologies, there are labs coming up. So that's one area, I think, where the ecosystem, basically for startup, it can come up with an idea. But if you expect the startup to industrialize it, for that, they need support.
So I think in your particular case, the technologies that you're talking about are not really, you know, software technologies. You actually need the major industrial research park ecosystems to be in place. So, you know, we've been seeing for the last at least 10, 15 years, the government has really been trying to set up. IIT Madras has a big, nowadays a lot of the IITs have industrial research parks. You're an IIT Madras alum yourself. So where is there still a gap, you think? Because we hear this over and over again about R&D spending in India, saying either the spending per capita is too low, or where the spending is done, the innovation is there, but there's still a gap in being able to take the R&D to all the way to, you know, to practice. So where's the gap? What's missing there?
See, one I don't know, I would probably call it a disadvantage, is that lot of focus is on becoming a unicorn. In engineering, I mean, when I say engineering, it's the core non-computer science oriented engineering. The incubation period is rather long, and not too many investors or not too many even startups are interested in that, because it's a lot more sweat and toil before you actually see results. I say that is probably the biggest reason why not so much has happened.
Thank you. Last word is to you to basically say, you know, you've really been successful in the US at getting buy-in from the highest levels of government. If we had to do the same in India, what would it take to create a series of climate museums here?
So a couple of things. One, I agree with Dr. Sundaresan that we need an ecosystem of connected dots. NASA spends 1% of its budget on education. NSF, NOAA, a number of federal agencies, they invest about a percentage of its total annual budget in public awareness. The same can be done here, not just from one ministry, but Ministry of Education, Ministry of Heritage and Culture, Ministry of Natural Resources, Ministry of Tourism. All of these ministries can put a percentage towards public education and awareness. And then projects like these can be a good PPP example, public-private partnership. The money comes from philanthropy, money comes from state and federal government, and money comes from financial institutions that regard this as a project perhaps to be funded with a green bond or a blue bond, which is the new financial model of creating CapEx.
Thank you so much. Really useful points from both panelists in terms of very specific technologies, in terms of building the ecosystem, and then you specifically mentioned blended financing as well. Thank you so much for both of you for participating. We're out of time on this panel, but thank you very much to the audience as well.
Thank you.
நன்றி. தொடர்ந்து அடுத்ததாக ஃபெட்னா அமைப்பினுடைய முன்னாள் தலைவர் திரு கால்டுவெல் வேல்நம்பி அவர்களை சிறப்புரை வழங்க வருமாறு அன்போடு கேட்டுக்கொள்கிறோம்.
அனைவருக்கும் வணக்கம். அஜந்தாவில் இல்லாத ஐட்டத்தை நான் கொண்டு வந்திருக்காங்க. மினிஸ்டர் வரத்துக்கு ஒரு 10 நிமிஷம் ஆகும். அதனால் இடைசெருகளாக இங்கு உங்களுடன் இணைந்து வந்திருக்கிறேன். விழா எப்படி போயிட்டுருக்கு? ஒரு உங்களுடைய இந்த ஒரு தருணம் நல்லா இருக்குன்னா ஒரு கைத்தட்டலோடு சொன்னீங்கன்னா எப்படி இருக்குங்கிறது எங்களுக்கு தெரியும். மிக்க மிக்க நன்றி. ஒரு சின்ன சிறப்புரை சொல்லுவோம். தமிழின் உயிர் தொல்காப்பியம், தமிழனின் உயிர் திருக்குறள். தமிழே என்னை ஈன்ற தாயே, என் வாழ்வே அமிழ்தே அடிபோற்றினேன். அனைவருக்கும் இனிய மதிய மாலை வணக்கம். எதுக்கு இங்கே வந்து வட அமெரிக்க தமிழ்ச்சங்க பேரவை ஸ்டார்ட் அப் தமிழ்நாடோட இணைந்து பண்ணணும் அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு நிறைய கேள்விகள் அமெரிக்காவில் இருக்கிறவங்களுக்கு பெரிய குழப்பங்களும் கேள்விகளும் வந்தது. அப்போது இந்த திட்டத்தை எடுக்கிறதுக்காக இரண்டு முக்கிய கருவை எடுத்து வைத்தோம். ஒன்று, தொப்புள் கொடி உறவில் வளர்ந்த வாழ்ந்த உருவாக்கிய நம்மை பெற்ற ஈன்ற தாய்க்கு நம்ம என்ன பண்ண முடியும் அப்படிங்கிறத யோசித்து நம்ம குடும்ப அளவுக்கு எல்லா வகையிலையுமே அப்பா அம்மாவை பார்த்துக்கிறதுக்கான ஒரு சூழல் உருவாக்கிக்கிட்டோம், புலம்பெயர்ந்த தமிழர்கள் எல்லாருமே. ஆனால் நம்மளை ஈன்ற தாய் ஒருவர், நம் மொழியால் இனத்தால் அனைவரையும் இணைத்த தாய் தமிழ்த்தாய். அந்த தமிழ்த்தாயினுடைய மகன்களாக நாம் என்ன ஒரு அம்மாவுக்கு கடமை செய்தோம் அப்படிங்கிறத யோசித்து பார்க்கும் பொழுது, பிறந்த மண்ணில் சொந்த ஊரில் யாரேனும் ஏதேனும் செய்பவர்களுக்கு தொழிலை, ஒரு வேலை வாய்ப்பை, ஒரு வளர்ச்சியை உருவாக்குவதற்கு புலம்பெயர்ந்து சம்பாதித்து வேலை பார்த்துட்டு இருந்தாலும் சரி, தொழில் செஞ்சிட்டு இருந்தாலும் சரி, அமெரிக்காவில் வேலை பார்த்துட்டு இருக்கிறவங்களுக்கும் வாழ்க்கை அனுபவங்களும் தொழில் அனுபவங்களும் அவர்களுடைய நேரத்தையாவது கொடுக்க முடியுமா, அல்லது சம்பாதித்த பணத்தையாவது கொடுக்க முடியுமா? இந்த நேரமும் பணத்தையும் இணைத்து கொடுத்தால் அது யாருக்காவது பயன்படுவதற்கான ஒரு வேலைவாய்ப்பை உருவாக்குறதுக்கான ஒரு வாய்ப்பை உருவாக்க முடியுமா அப்படிங்கிற இந்த ஒரு 3 குறிக்கோளை வச்சு உருவாக்கப்பட்ட இந்த சூழல் அழகா நேட்டிவ் லீட் ஃபவுண்டேஷன் ஒவ்வொரு கிராமத்தில் போய் என்ன பண்ணிட்டு இருந்தாங்க, அதிலிருந்து அடுத்த வளர்ச்சியாக இந்த ஸ்டார்ட் அப் நிறுவனத்தில் இருக்கக்கூடிய சிவராஜ ராமநாதன் அவர்கள் இன்னைக்கு ஒரு 37% வளர்ச்சியை ஒரு 14,500 ஸ்டார்ட் அப் நிறுவனத்தை உருவாக்கி கொடுத்துருக்க இந்த ஒரு வருஷத்தில் அதுக்கு ஒரு கைத்தட்டு கூட கொடுக்கலாம். ஒரு 15,000 கம்பெனிஸை உருவாக்கி இருக்கோம் தமிழ்நாட்டில் அப்படிங்கிறது ஒரு பெரிய ஒரு அக்காம்ப்ளிஷ்மெண்ட்டு. அந்த மாதிரி இருக்கிறவங்களை அடையாளப்படுத்தி பணம் 10 லட்ச ரூபாய் கொடுத்து தொழில் ஆரம்பிக்கிறவங்களை அடுத்த ஸ்கேலப் பண்ணுறதுக்கு என்ன பண்ணுறது அப்படிங்கிறதுக்காக நம்ம எப்படி இணைந்து செயல்பட முடியும் அப்படிங்கிற ஒரு உணர்வுபூர்வமான ஒரு சூழலை உருவாக்கி கொடுப்பதற்காக தான் நிறைய பேருக்கு இன்னைக்கு அமெரிக்கன் கான்சுலேட்லேருந்து ஒரு 3 பேர் வந்திருக்காங்க. இங்கேருந்து ஒரு விசா வாங்கிட்டு அமெரிக்கா வருதுன்னா எவ்வளோ கஷ்டம் அப்படிங்கிறது உங்களுக்கு தெரியும். இது ஒரு முதல் படி. அவங்களும் இன்றைக்கி இங்கே வந்து இணைஞ்சிருக்காங்க நம்மளோட சேர்ந்து பயணம் பண்ணுறதுக்கு அப்படிங்கிறதுக்கு. அதனால் அந்த விசா கிடைக்கக்கூடிய ஒரு வாய்ப்புகளையும் உருவாக்கி அவர்களோட இணைந்து செயல்படுவதற்கு என்ன ஒரு ஊடகத்தை உருவாக்கி கொடுக்க முடியும் அப்படிங்கிற ஒரு தொலைநோக்கு பார்வையிலையும் இருக்கக்கூடிய பணத்தை இங்கே கொண்டு வந்து கொடுப்பதற்கு அரசு வழியாக கிராமங்களில் இருக்கக்கூடிய நிறுவனங்கள் அடுத்த கட்டத்துக்கு எடுத்து செல்வதற்கு என்ன பண்ணணும் அப்படிங்கிற ஒரு முன் முயற்சிக்காகவும், அடுத்து முக்கியமான ஒரு காரணம் ரிவர்ஸ் அக்வசிஷன் அப்படிங்கிற ஒரு கான்செப்டை தமிழக அரசோட, யுஎஸ் கான்சுலேட்டோட, இங்கே இருக்க வங்கிகளோட இன்னைக்கு 100 கோடி ரூபாய்க்கு உத்திரவாதம் கொடுக்கக்கூடிய அரசு செயல் திட்டங்களை எப்படி பயன்படுத்தி நம்ம இங்கே தமிழ்நாட்டிலிருந்து வேறு மாநிலங்களில் போய் தொழில் பண்ணுறவங்க உயர்வதற்கு எவ்வளோ கடினமோ அதை எளிமைப்படுத்துவதுங்கிறது ஆங்கிலம் பேசக்கூடிய நாடுகளில் போய் தொழில் பண்ணால் எவ்வளோ எளிமையாகும் அப்படிங்கிற ஒரு சூழலை உருவாக்கி கொடுக்கக்கூடிய வாழ்க்கை முறை நம்மக்கிட்ட இருக்கிறத சரியாக பயன்படுத்திக்கிட்டு அந்த ரிவர்ஸ் அக்வசிஷனில் இந்த 100 கோடிக்கு அவர்கள் கொடுக்கக்கூடிய உத்தரவாதத்தை வைத்து வங்கிகளில் எப்படி பணத்தை நாம் இணைத்து செயல்படுத்தி இங்கே போய் ஒரு நிறுவனத்தை உருவாக்குவதற்கான வாய்ப்புகளை உருவாக்கும் ஒரு பாலமாக, பலமாக இந்த வட அமெரிக்க தமிழ்ச்சங்க பேரவையினுடைய தொழில் முனைவோர் மாநாடு தொடர்ந்து நடந்து கொண்டிருப்பது முதல் முறையாக நம் மண்ணில், நம் ஊரில். இது இப்போ சென்னையில் ஆரம்பிக்கிறோம். இதை ஒவ்வொரு ஊருக்காக கொண்டு போகிறதுக்கு உண்டான வாய்ப்புகள் வரும் காலத்தில் அடுத்து வரும் தலைமுறைகள் எடுத்து செல்வாங்க. அந்த மாதிரி பயன்பெறுவதற்கான ஒரு தளத்தை உருவாக்கி நாங்கள் ஒரு 300 பேர் வந்தால் போதும் அப்படின்னு நினச்சோம். ஆனால் வந்திருக்கக்கூடிய பதிவுகளோ என்னமோ பார்த்தீங்கன்னா 850 பதிவுகள் வந்து எதிர்பார்த்ததை விட இரட்டிப்பு மகிழ்வையும் நீங்கள் கொடுத்து இதற்கு ஒரு பெரிய ஆதரவை கொடுத்தது. இதற்கு வந்து இருந்து இந்த விழாவில் பங்கு பெற்று என்ன உணர்வலைகள் உங்களுக்கு இருக்கோ அந்த உணர்வலைகளை எடுத்து அதை கொண்டு போய் சேர்த்த வேண்டிய உங்களுக்கு ஒரு பெரிய கைத்தட்டுகளை எங்கள் சார்பாக நீங்களே உங்களுக்கு ஒரு கைத்தட்டலை கொடுத்துட்டு, இதே மாதிரி யார் தொழில் முனைவோர் எந்த ஊரில் எங்கே நடந்தாலும் இவங்க என்ன பண்ணுவாங்க அப்படிங்கிறத பற்றி யோசிக்காம என்னதான் பண்ண போகிறாங்க அப்படிங்கிற ஒரு சூழலை வந்து ஒரு ஆர்வமாக பார்க்கக்கூடிய ஒரு தருணத்தை உருவாக்கி கொள்வது அப்படிங்கிறது மிக மிக முக்கியமான பணியாக இருக்கும். அதனால் ஒவ்வொருவரும் நாம் இணைந்து இந்த ஒரு சேர்ந்து ஒரு நல்ல ஒரு சூழலை உருவாக்கி நம்ம தொழில் தரம் தமிழர்கள் உயர வச்சோம், வாழ வச்சோம் அப்படின்னம்னா எஞ்சி நிற்பது ஒரு மொழி இனத்தினுடைய வளர்ச்சி தொடர்ந்து இருக்கும் அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு இந்த வாய்ப்பளித்த வட அமெரிக்க தமிழ்ச்சங்க பேரவைக்கும் ஸ்டார்ட் அப் நிறுவனத்திற்கும் நன்றி கூறி விடைபெறுகிறேன். மந்திரி வந்துட்டாங்க, நம்ம பேச்சை குறைச்சிக்கிறோம். அவரை வந்து நேராக மேடைக்கு அழைக்க அடுத்து வர வச்சிடலாம்னு நினைக்கிறேன். நன்றி, வணக்கம்.